Hi students, this is Thara Ravisankar, Assistant Professor in Department of Media Studies, Price Nagar College, Trivandrum. Welcome to our journalism class. Today we are going to discuss on the different types of journalism. What is journalism? It is reporting and writing the news and packaging it for an audience. And next. Where can we find the news? Newspapers, magazines, internet, televisions and others. And what are the primary role of publication? News reporting. A high priority is broadcast or newspaper, but a low priority is magazine or a yearbook. You have to decide what is newsworthy, that's all. And next is entertainment, questionable in any setting. Do you want to entertain your readers more than information? In this world of online and the competition, high competition, each and every media is competing with each other, then you should think about news plus something else. Now going in detail on all those things, now we are going to the most important things according to journalism. Okay. Now we talk about the different models regarding journalism. One is the advocacy model. That means it provides news from the perspective of a political party. Usually advocacy is a very common thing what we notice in our today's news atmosphere, and this model defines journalism until the beginning of 20th century but fades out as a political parties lost pass and mass circulation newspaper developed. But I think in this particular circumstance, today's circumstance is coming back, and it still exists in things such as magazines for special interest organizations and newsletters. Next is the marketing model. That means provides whatever kind of journalism that audience demands. So audience is given key importance, and because what is newsworthy is determined by advertising, right? And advertisers, they are concerned about the audience of the readers, and the content is selected here only to make money. Like tabloid journalism and all. And journalists determine, in the next model is trustee model. Here the journalists determine what the audience need to know and delivers. And based on the point, the readers or the viewers does not have the time or skill to find out everything that is happening. So they trust in the reporter to do so. The reporter chooses the story. Next is the different 6 types of audience, what we could see in usual atmosphere. One is mainstream. That means they read local newspapers, watch local news, is interested in sports, crime, but not foreign news. That means they go behind local and more close to them. And basically broadcast, that means gets more news from local TV and networks such as prime time magazines like Primetime News, and enjoys health, community and crime news. Next is very occasional. That means they tunes in only when something big happens. Otherwise they don't bother the news media. And next is constant. That means they watches, they listen to and reads almost everything, like all topics. That means they have a regular habit of going through the newspapers. Can we call them couch potatoes? I don't think so. Couch potatoes are, that means they are very immersed before the television screen, or always sitting in front of that. Constant listeners of news may not be like that, because they have a habit of reading newspapers. And serious news. Next is they are very conscious about reading serious news. Relies heavily on national public radio, news hours, Wall Street journals like big newspapers, and news and business. And next is tabloids, like the focus on what we call flash or midday like newspapers, and they go behind some kind of spicy news as like sensational news. Then now we are going to the most important part of our class, that is types of journalism. Okay, let's move on to the types of journalism. First one is investigative journalism. It refers to the forum of investigation. That means forum of journalism in which journalists dwell deeply into a given topic, often related to political or corporate wrongdoing, for an extended period of time. Investigative journalists often make use of primary sources of information such as original interviews and documents. And now moving to the next, Next category is sting journalism. On lawful environment, sting operation is a deceptive operation designed to catch a person committing a crime. Sting operation. A typical sting operation will have a undercover law enforcement officer, detective, or cooperative member of the public plays a role as a criminal partner or potential victim and go along with the suspect's action to gather evidence of suspect's wrongdoing. You often confuse with investigative journalism and sting journalism. Both are two different things. I'll go to the investigative journalism slide once again. That means investigation means going deep and deep. That means very in-depth reporting is done, dwell deeply into the topic, and the journalists make use of the primary sources. That means they go directly and find out the news stories, and rather than depending on the secondary documents. And whereas in the case of sting journalism, it is much more kind of a sensational style of reporting is coming into that. It is not sensationalism. It is a instinct to find out the unknown. That means sting operation is totally unethical, and it is a deceptive form of operation. That means you are invading into the privacies, into the what you are crossing the boundaries, and you are finding out your own stories to make your readers more charmed or more attracted towards your kind of journalism. And now moving to the most very common, that means that we know that this online journalism is the journalism of this current period, right? And it refers to a news content produced or distributed via the internet, and particularly materials created by the journalist itself. But online journalism gives so many priorities to our what kind of citizen journalists do. That means they have an opportunity to find their stories, and they have opportunities to portray their stories. While blogs and other emerging form of online news communications are widely acknowledged as significantly influencing mainstream news content. Even the blogs or such online contents are influencing our mainstream news organizations or kind of news delivery on both online and offline modes. As an impact of all these online mode of journalism, you know that almost all mainstream newspapers are having their own online versions. That means they are owning their online websites or online. They have a particular online edition too. To compete with all other kind of the social medias, all other kinds of online medias which exist online, only in online, and they go behind the youngsters. They go behind the youngsters, and they are forcing the youngsters to read the news, even either via online if they prefer so. And next is they are often considered as a distinct phenomena and treated under the category. Online journalism is also called as alternative media, new media, or web journalism. And next is ambush journalism. What is ambush journalism? It refers to the journalistic practice of confronting potential news subjects without any prior warning. That means it is a controversial journalistic practice which some observers consider unethical, and other observers believe provide for some truthful responses as part of the news subject. That means the ambush journalism, actually they are invading into the privacies or invading into the newsmakers, and that means they are confronting potential news subjects without any prior warning. They are just breaking all the practices of ethical journalism, and that is what I feel here to ambush journalism. And now I am moving to the next kind of journalism, that is backpack journalism. Backpack journalism has its own priority in our news media because today's news world, they prefer to hire such backpack journalists. That means it's an aspect of the changing working conditions. Journalists whereby they have to assume multiple and professional responsibilities simultaneously. That means backpack journalists commonly serves simultaneously as reporters, photographers, videographers, editors, and produce a given story. That means they have a ability to do multiple things. They are multi-talented, and today's world demands such kinds of multi-talented people too. And now moving to the next kind of journalism, that is advocacy journalism. What is advocacy journalism? It is a genre of journalism like propaganda. It fact-based but supports a particular viewpoint. Advocacy, from the term advocacy itself, we can understand that it supports a specific point of view. An advocacy journalist might be expected to focus on stories dealing with corporate business practices, government policies, political corruptions, and social issues. And it is arguably that advocacy journalist serves the public interest in a way similar to mudrakers or whistleblowers. They act as mudrakers or whistleblowers. Some advocacy journalists rejects the supposed, that means objectivity of the mainstream press as a practical impossibility, and some others take the position that the economic censorship exerted by corporate censors, corporate sponsors, who is that is no different than political censorship. So advocacy journalism is a kind of journalism. I think even though we call them it is non-ethical, it is unethical, we don't practice that, but still most of the media go behind this kind of advocacy journalists. If you just go through the news hours of particular news medias and 9 o'clock news and all, definitely you could find the fringes of advocacy journalism in all those stories. Examples regarding advocacy journalism, that means restricted to usually traditionally the advocacy journalism is seen only in editorial pages and OPED pages, but now it is creeping to other pages too. Okay, and what's next? Next is journalism. That means I'm going in a hurry as I have to finish all this type of journalism in this class itself, and definitely my students will go deep into this kinds of journalism. And I'm moving to the next journalism, that is journalism. What is journalism? It is a pejorative term for a form of journalism in which press releases, news stories provided by news agencies, and other forms of pre-packed materials inserted by reported news are used to create articles in newspapers and other media, making use of packed materials, that is which are ready to cook like materials, and such as in the form of press news, press releases, or the wire stories to produce one story. They are not finding their own stories, they are not finding primary sources, they are not going behind any stories, they are making stories out of what available to them, what is provided to them. That is journalism. And next is journalism. I think in this COVID situation, most of the news stories is going in such a way because they have so many travel restrictions, they have so many personal limitations to invade in the story and invade into the public atmosphere. And in lockdown period, most of the journalists were doing all those things because everything is delivered to them. If something happened in their local circumstance, or something is going on, the news desk itself, they provide the basic materials to the reporters, and reporters find out, they cook a story from the materials provided to them. Okay, and next is journalism. You just go and read all these examples of journalism. It is, the word is coined by the British journalist that is Nick Davis to describe what results when journalists fail to perform the basic function of their profession, and including covering their beats. That is what Davis, and you can see the Davis statement here. This is journalists who are no longer out gathering, but who are reduced instead to passive processors of whatever materials comes their way, churning out stories, whether real, even, or PR artifice, and important or trivial, true or false. Okay, that is journalism. Next is literary journalism. What is literary journalism? It refers to a form of journalism that uses various literary styles and techniques to make the resulting news and other non-fiction stories as compelling to audience as possible. Common ingredients in literary journalism stories include well-developed settings, plots, and characters. That means literary journalism refers to a form of journalism that uses various literary styles and techniques, just like writing a novel or writing a short story. You are making a news story to make resulting news and other non-fiction stories as compelling to audience as possible, just like an influential story, just what we call story in literature. And common ingredients in such literary journalism include well-developed settings, plot, and characters, as you see in any other story formations. That means any literary works. And next is narrative journalism. What is narrative journalism? Narrative journalism is also, and the name for literary journalism or long form journalism is also called as long form journalism. Narrative journalism, literary journalism, long form journalism, they treat news stories as if like a non-fiction, that means just like a fictional piece, they are writing non-fiction pieces. Okay, and now moving to the next. Okay, you can see so many details regarding literary journalism or narrative journalism here also. Okay. Narrative journalism, a form of journalism differing from straight news stories. That is the truth. That means it is totally different from straight news stories. And often readers only the basic that means basic questions like 5 Ws and 1 H is answered here. And narrative news stories are longer than straight news and allow the writer to employ more elements of prose writing. The famed journalist Tom Wolfe is among those credited with pioneering the use of narrative journalism. Now we are moving to the next form of journalism, that is new journalism. What is new journalism? What is new journalism? American literary movement in 1960s and 70s that pushed the boundaries of traditional journalism and non-fiction writing. The genre combined journalistic research and the technique, that means journalistic research with the technique of fiction writing in the reporting of stories about real life events. What is new journalism? As in traditional investigative reporting, writers in the genre immersed themselves in their subject, at times spending months in the field gathering facts through research, interviews, and observations. That means, as if in investigative journalism, here the writers in this genre, they immerse themselves in their subjects. At times, they spend months in the gathering of facts through research, interviews, and observations. Therefore, they finished works were very different and, however, from the feature stories typically published in newspapers and magazines of that time. And instead of employing traditional journalists, story structures and an institutional voice, they constructed well-developed characters, sustained dialogues, vivid scenes, and strong plot lines marked with a dramatic tension. So we could say that this is a combination of investigative journalism with literary journalism, right? We could feel it like that. Nobody's stated like that, but I feel it like that. Just like what we say, it have a kind of in-depth reporting. What we see in investigative journalism, at the same time, they are developing the characters, sustained dialogues, vivid scenes, and strong plot lines marked by dramatic tensions. They also wrote in voices that were distinctly their own. Their writing style and the time and money their in-depth research and long stories are very, very vital to this kind of journalism, and did not fit the need or budget of most newspapers. That means although the editors of certain newspapers and the prominent magazines sought out their writers, published their works with great commercial success, they are also known as non-fiction novels, and that means that was totally different from the kind of journalism, and it did not fit the needs or budgets of the most of the newspapers. That is a notable point, and it's also known as non-fiction novels, and many of those works became bestsellers. Next is sensationalism or sensational journalism. I think you are very familiar with this term, right? and familiar to a form of journalism that is explicitly aimed at increasing audience numbers and rating at all cost. Sensational journalists often focus attention on issues and events that appeal to the lowest common denominator and do so in a highly exaggerated and emotional manner. That means sensationalism is often done to attract the readers. That means to gain the readers' attention. They cross the boundaries of what is called ethical journalism or constructive journalism or solution-based journalism. They always find things in a sensational manner with very big headlines, sensational kind of thumbnails and everything. They used in each media, whether it is an online or broadcast or newspaper, they use different aspects for making things sensational. Okay, moving to the next, that is gonzo journalism. What is gonzo journalism? What is gonzo journalism? Gonzo journalism refers to a highly subjective form of journalism that makes no pretense of aspiring to detached objectivity. And it typically relies on first-person narratives. Gonzo journalism is a highly subjective form of journalism, and it typically relies on the first-person narratives, in which the journalist is a central part of the story, and compelling language and imagery to appeal to audience. Okay, and moving to the next slide. Next is Gocha journalism. Goche journalism. It refers to instances where journalists, through the use of aggressive interviewing techniques, try to compel news subjects to make self-damaging statements. They provoke the news subjects to speak out self-damaging statements that place them in a wholly unfavorable light. It is typically used to describe journalist behavior during political election campaigns. You have often seen this in this particular circumstances, in the election circumstances. You can see so many that means the essence of Gochi journalism in your various medias like print, the broadcast, or online. Okay, moving to the next. This is more about Goche journalism. It is a purely negative form of journalism used to refer to journalistic techniques that are designed to entrap interviewees. They are trapping the interviewees. And journalists who use these techniques try to catch people in contradictory statements that damage their reputation. One technique of Goche journalism is to get the person to state a position and then show a clip of footage where they contradict with that position. That means in the previous period they may have stated something contradictory, and this will be juxtaposed and shown in your broadcast or television or even in newspapers. They too try to use it in a different way. Another tactic is to take statements out of the context and present them as a representing the whole picture. As that means they present them as representing the whole picture. That means only pulling a particular statement. Okay, so that means the contradictory things are shown in succession. And other strategies include putting the interviewee on the spot with embarrassing information, or eliciting an angry response that reflects poorly on them. And some uses of Goche journalism are ethical and proper. If a political figure is behaving in a dishonest way, putting them on the spot is a good idea. Okay. And next is horse race journalism. Contemporary political reporting, especially news that has a focus on election and policy debates, it is often covered as through these matters. There was a kind of gaming, that means a game among competing candidates and elites, and thus the dominant approach to covering the election has come to be referred to in academics basically as horse race journalism. That is just like a horse race. They are following the candidates. They are focusing on the elections. They are focusing on the policy debates and all. And next is wiki journalism. It refers to news and other kind of non-fiction stories that is produced through the use of particular web applications like wikis. That means here the non-fiction stories are produced through the use of particular web application known as wikis. And this collaborative technology allows journalists, often in collaboration with citizen journalists, to continuously modify, add and delete contents to stories. Okay. And that is a kind of wiki is, you know, wiki is open source software, so many people can collaborate onto that. Okay. Hope my students got a very clear understanding of different types of journalism. Here signing off, your teacher Thara Ravisankar.